Kingdom. Today, we're going to talk about copyright as it pertains to use of scripture, the different translations of the Bible, how to use it properly and legally, whether you are creating social media images with a verse of scripture on it, whether you're creating free or paid things such as Bible studies, coloring books, things like that. What is the proper way to cite the scripture and give credit for copyright purposes? So, first and foremost, I am not an attorney. I am not a legal anything, but I have gone to different sites such as Bible Gateway and all the kind of Bible places to break out what they say about it. And so I'm going to show you and read you word for word what they have on their sites. I do encourage you to dive deeper if you're unsure about something, but it's actually pretty simple if you're taking it from the Bible Gateway site. So I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to include these links in the video notes below so that you can go to them yourself, but also to show you how to go about requesting permission to use the ones if they're not part of the public domain. Okay, so let's hop over here, share screen. Okay, so first and foremost, the Bible is copyrighted for the most part, right? Now, we can argue all day long that only God owns what's in the Bible, but we are in a human world here, and things like how text is used and things like that fall under copyright guidelines. And so to keep yourself legal, to keep you out of trouble and things like that, you want to make sure that you understand how to use it and that you are giving proper credit where credit is due. It's same as if you were writing a paper, for college or something, and you had to cite your sources. It's the same thing. The Bible is the source that you're taking the verse of scripture from. And so you have to give credit to the translation that you're taking it from, because every single translation kind of words things differently, right? So first, there are a few translations that are what is called public domain. That means that it's copyrighted, but it's fair use. Anybody can use it. You don't have to seek permission. These ones right here on the screen, American Standard, Darby, this one that I can't pronounce, King James, World English, Bible Young Literal Translation, Reina Valera, Antigua, and Biblia Sacra Vulgata. All of these are part of public domain. And that means that if you are using any of these versions for the verses in your piece of work, whatever it is, then there's no request of permission or anything. You don't have to worry about it. Now, I will say that no matter where you take it from, public domain or not, you should always include the translation at the end of the verse. For example, John 3:16, ASV, NIV, whatever. Anytime you use scripture, whether it be on a social media image or using it, say, in a blog post or a printed work such as, printable Bible study or something like that, you should always include the translation at the end of the verse. Now, we'll get a little deeper into using them inside blog posts here in just a minute, but this is on Bible Gateway. And again, I'm going to include this link in the video notes. So now let's hop over here to this page. So this is all the versions. We're just going to scroll down here to English, right? Because that's the one we're going to be most concerned with. So ASV was a public domain. So let's just kind of look. So if you click on ASV here, it's going to open this up and have, all the books and chapters and everything. But what we want to look at is copyright. So you're going to click this tab right here, and it's going to tell you, it's going to do this for every single translation. But I just wanted to point out this one to show you what it looks like for public domain. Because this Bible is in the public domain, you are free to quote from or reprint it in the absence of detailed publication information. If you need to cite it in a paper or published work, we recommend citing the website where you found it, such as Bible Gateway. We have no additional copyright or historical data about this Bible. So again, if you're making, scripture coloring pages to sell on Etsy or something like that, you don't need to seek permission to use the verses if you were taking them from the ASV translation. Now, it's very important to understand when you're using scripture, if you are quoting a verse in its entirety, it needs to be exact because, again, every translation has a variation of a word or couple of words that it uses. And so to ensure that you are properly citing the proper piece of content, the verse, you need to make sure you're copying it verbatim. Some editing that I've done for guest writers and things for my site, they'll cite it as, a verse as one translation, but when I go look it up, I always look it up. They get a few of the words, like they make them different. Well, when you make the words different, it makes it a different translation. So it's very important. The easiest way to do it is just open up Bible Gateway, copy it literally from that version in here, and then paste it into your blog post and then, or wherever you're putting it, Canva, whatever. And then there's no question that you're copying the exact translation of that verse. Okay, so this is public domain. So again, public domain, honestly, most of them, King James and all those are more of the older traditional type of verses. A lot of people don't like using them in artistic things such as coloring books, even Bible studies. Me personally, I prefer the more modern translations because they make more sense to me. So if you're wanting to use any of the ones not listed on this list, then you'll need to do your research to find out what the requirement is for that translation. For the most part, you can use any of the other translation is in free things. So if you're creating, say, a freebie just to give your audience, say, some free coloring pages, or maybe you created like a free Bible study, right, that has verses cited, or in your blog posts, those you don't need to seek permission per se, but you do still need to put the translation at the end of each of the verses. The issue that we're going to be most concerned with is for those of you who want to create a commercial product. So this is going to be something that you are going to create with the intention of selling it, maybe on Etsy or maybe, Gumroad or however you sell your stuff. But the intention of the product is to sell it, right? It's a commercial product. So that's what we're going to be more concerned with. This is where you start having to request permission and get an official permission kind of thing from the publisher of that translation. And so how you find out that information is going to be the same one here. So I am a big fan of NIV. So I'm just going to open this one up here. And again, it's going to be just like that other one. So we're going to click copyright. And it's going to tell you everything on here. So for this one, the NIV may be quoted in any form, written, visual, electronic, or audio, up to and inclusive of 500 verses without express written permission. So again, your blog posts, right? I really hope you're not putting 500 verses in a blog post. That's way too long of a blog post. So your blog posts are good. Just cite it as NIV. Now, if you're creating like a Bible study, again, these are free things, not commercial. You're creating maybe a scripture coloring book, things like that. As long as you're using less than 500 verses, it's fair game. You can use it, just cite the translation at the end of each verse. Providing the verses do not amount to a complete book of the Bible. In other words, don't try to make a new Bible and then say it's yours, even if it's free. That's obviously going to be over 500 verses. And then here, nor do the verses quoted account for 25% or more of the total text of the works in where quoted. Now, for those of you who've been following me for any amount of time, in reference to blog posts, I've been very adamant about if you're going to put verses, say your post is literally, 20 Bible verses about spring, I don't know, at the top. And so obviously the meat and potatoes of the post is going to be the actual verses. But as you see here, it says 25% or more of the total text of the work. I actually have sort of I do kind of a 50-50 mindset, but when you're doing blog posts, if you're putting all these verses in here, then the majority of the content is going to be cited, which means a minority of the blog post would be your own work. For Google and for blog content, making it look like not scrape content, not duplicate content, and all of that. It's important that your words, your text exceeds cited text. And so having a few paragraphs, before you dive into the verses, having some close. So I call it intro and outro paragraphs. If you followed me, you've heard me say those. But then also, instead of just listing the verses, say as bullets, have a verse and then a paragraph, a verse and then a paragraph. And that way, at least it's 50-50, plus the additional beginning intro and outro paragraphs, right? So again, by law here, this one says no more than 25% of the total content text. But this is kind of how I gauge it to make sure that I'm staying within those bounds. Now, again, if you're doing a Bible study, free things like that, then just make sure that you have more of your words than the scripture that you're citing. Now, if you want to use this particular translation for commercial products, so that's down here. There's some additional information here. Again, every one of these translations, it's going to read differently. So you need to read each one to find out exactly what the requirements are. But let's see. When quotations from the NIV text are used in non-tellable media such as church bulletins, a complete copyright notice is not required, but the initial NIV must appear at the end of each quotation. So that's where you just put it at the end of each verse. Any commentary or other biblical reference work produced for commercial sale that uses NIV must obtain written permission. So permission requests for the commercial use that exceed the above guidelines directed to, and then it has the address here, HarperCollins. And so you'll just submit a request to them. We're going to say, this is what you're wanting to create, the expected, like how many verses, just kind of describe the product that you're just planning to create and that you're requesting permission to use this translation in that commercial work. And then they'll send you a letter back, and then you keep that, and then it'll give you instructions on how to cite it in your commercial product, right? So basically it's going to be this here, but the letter that they send you back granting permission will give you all of that information. So really quick, let's look at let's look at the message. That's kind of a popular one these days. So we'll click on copyright here. This is pretty much the same thing, up to 500 verses or less than 25% for free works. Let's see. Permission requests for commercial and non-commercial must be directed in writing to Tyndale. You can do this one by email or call. So that one's kind of easy. So again, very, very important. Look up the translation that you're wanting to use. And then if it's going to be for commercial use, again, anything that you intend to sell, then you need to get the actual permission to use it in said product. Now, I want to give you a little cheat option here. Actually, I guess it's not cheating. It's more time management, saving hassle. So one of the things I like to do, especially if you're going to create things for sale. So I sell a lot of scripture coloring books on Etsy. And to be honest, I've never reached out for the commercial permissions. I don't have, I don't have a lot of coloring books, but I have a good handful. And so when I first did them, I'm like, I'm just going to do these. And if I really get into this in the future, then I'll go ahead and request permission. But how I got around all of that was, instead of using exact translations, you can paraphrase, right? So this is the same concept of when you're writing a paper. So if you cite word for word the source, like what the person said, literally verbatim, then you have to cite, right, where you got that information exactly. Like exactly the URL, back in the day, the exact book, all that stuff. But if you paraphrased what that information was, then there was a lesser form of the citation that was required. So on here, if there was a verse, let's see, for God so loved the world, he gave his only son, right? So if you were saying, putting that on a Bible verse coloring page, God gave up his son because he loves us so much, right? That's sort of a paraphrase. Those exact words in that exact order are found in no translation. There's no translation that says it that way. Now, many of the translations say variations of that, but if you take the verse that you're wanting to talk about and just summarize it, like in your own words, what does this verse mean? Then all you have to do is put John 3:16. You don't have to put the actual translation. So that's what I did for my coloring books. I just sort of paraphrase whatever the verse is, and then put the verse without a translation. And those are how all of my scripture coloring books are written. So that's just another option for you. Just make sure you are paraphrasing, as you know, if it even resembles the actual verse itself, then that's not a paraphrase. So it literally needs to be in your own words what that verse means. But otherwise, it's pretty simple. Like I said, I'm not an attorney, but you can go right here to Bible Gateway and read for yourself. The instructions are very, very clear for each of the translations. And so it's very important that you understand, not just understand them, but understand the legal requirement for using them properly. Like you can actually get in a lot of trouble if a translation copyright editor, whatever you call it, like Tyndale found your stuff on Etsy and you were using like all of their all of your products was NIV, and in nowhere did they find any record of you actually asking for permission to use it in commercial. You could get in trouble. So just understand what the requirements are. And then again, everything is on here on this Bible Gateway. I'm sure it's on other sites too. Bible Gateway just tends to be my go-to for all Bible translation and research. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. A lot of times we just don't think of it. We're like, it's the Bible. God owns it. We don't care about legal stuff. Again, the ones that are public domain, you can do whatever you want to with it. You can use them in commercial works, anything else. But any of the more modern or other translations, those are copyrighted. The publishers own the copyright to that translation of the original Bible. And so proper credit must be given to them. So anyway, if you have any questions, of course, you know where to find me. Hop over to the Facebook group. Please be sure to like this video, comment. Let me know if you have any questions. If you're not sure about something, I want to make sure everybody who's doing God's work on the internet is doing it legally, because that's the best way the enemy is going to try to come after us, is something like this. So, all right, guys, I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.